First of all, there's this redistricting hearing, the first of one that's going to be held around the state. It's going to be in Chicago a week from Monday, and this is to get public input. Eh, some of this I've heard will be, the average person off the street. Some of this will be from interest groups. What do you see kind of coming out of this, and is this something that is put on? It's nice to play into the media like us. It's a good show. It has the word transparency in it, which everyone loves. But is it actually going to play into redistricting? Is it going to factor into anything?
It's possible. I mean, it depends on what happens at a hearing. Hearings are, I mean, oftentimes legislative hearings are sort of set pieces, either that the opposition and the support for particular proposition will sort of bring in people and they get their arguments on the table, and sometimes when a bill is on its going to move, even the opposition will establish their arguments in a hearing, and that may be what's going to happen here is that they're just going to get their arguments on the table, get them to come to light, and that's and then the majority will just do whatever they want. On the other hand, it is possible that something may come up in these hearings, and hearings are not all set pieces. There is some informational component to them. Lawmakers don't know everything, and they hear a particular argument or a slant that they hadn't heard before, and especially on an issue like this that less than 50%, probably well less than 50% of these lawmakers have gone through this process before and don't know what redistricting is all about, really. I mean, and they haven't heard all the arguments. So the hearings aren't totally for show, but there is a big factor of that in there, yeah.
I know that we've talked about this before, but first time since the 1970 Constitution where you have one party controlling pretty much the whole process. How does that play into redistricting, and how has having different parties in either the Senate or the House or in the governorship played into redistricting in the past?
Well, it really couldn't be more important, and basically you have three legs of this. Three institutions have to come to some sort of agreement on this. If they can't, then it goes into this sort of arcane committee system and drawing name out of a hat and so forth. That's what has happened every time in 80, 90, and 2000. What we're going to have this time is a quicker process, a quieter process. It's going to be behind closed doors more than normal, and there'll be less in the media about it. It'll be less of an extended process, and it'll be very different than any time in anyone's memory other than perhaps Michael Madigan. But even there, I mean, in 1970 they did it through a negotiation process, and it didn't have to go to the committee, or commission. But yeah, it couldn't be more different.
Yeah. Is there going to be, there's one party, and sometimes that kind of gets put as United Front, but obviously Democrats don't always agree with Democrats,
Right.
Especially given that Chicago lost population. There's in all likelihood going to be a Democrat who loses their district. Where does that negotiation take place, like you were talking about, behind closed doors, and how does that kind of play out? Instead of Democrat and Republican, you have Democrat v. Democrat. How does that play out?
Yeah, well, you've got a couple of basic tensions that are going on in there, even in any kind of redistricting. Number one, the parties they maximize their power by spreading their voters out more thinly around districts. So say maybe have 60% in each district who's of their party, and then to the extent that they can't do that in areas of the state which are mostly the other party, then they'll try to cram 100% of the opposition into a few districts, and that maximizes the party's control. But what that does, on the other hand, is make individual members of the majority party nervous, because now they've got only 60% of their district, and they know, elections swing. They only have to look to 2010 to see how big things can change from the previous election. By nature they're conservative, as everybody is when they're talking about life and death in their own profession. So what they would prefer individually is to get 100% of their people in the district be of their party. And so you've got that tension anytime, even if it's going to the commission or whatever. And so the Democrats are going to be facing this because they control it all themselves at this point. And yes, it will happen behind closed doors. It's not. This is a very private process for the most part. Not being an insider, I don't know, and certainly this time things could change from previous times, but in previous go-rounds, I've heard from people who were involved in the process that, it has a lot to do with, it's the sort of thing where there's a room where all the data and computers are and the staffers are that are working on this, and they bring in members 1, 2 at a time, 3 at a time, and say, what do you want? What are we going to get? This is what we're going to do. And there's gnashing of teeth and screaming and pulling of hair and crying. And then they leave, and that's all there is to it.